It just makes no sense.
Well,
And
I'm not sure if I want to say it's evil or genius. One of
somewhere
the
in
two.
between, yeah, it's a very pirate thing to do. But initially, what I
It is.
wanted to do was to see how far I could push it. Hello, my fellow Caribbean refugees all over the world. Here's here I'll try to come up with something cool every time. But here's a new episode of the Captain's Cabin, and today I have the honor and the pleasure of speaking with Mr. François-Olivier Leblanc, a senior veteran developer, iOS developer, and as you could have guessed by now, a somewhat of a sports and health aficionado. At least he's into long distance running, and today we'll learn a lot more about François Olivier. But first of all, I'd like him to introduce himself. So François, please tell us a bit more about you. Um, your career journey, your area of expertise. If we're talking professionally speaking, but also any interest you may have, anything like a what we like to call a cabin gossip fact, so something that is very little known in the world about yourself.
First of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with you. So, as you say, my name is François-Olivier. I introduce myself as Frank most of the time. It's easier
We'll go
for
with
everyone involved. And as you mentioned, I'm a senior iOS developer. Uh, I've been doing development for iOS since the iOS 5 beta time. So about 12 years ago, something like that. Before that, I was a graphic designer. Uh, that's what I do. That's what I did before uh, going back to the university and study computer science, which I never did before. It's actually really the iPhone that made me want to jump and develop for the iPhone. Something about the device and the interaction that made me want to go create something for that
right.
platform.
Yeah, because if you started
Um,
years ago, that's about like 2011, right? That's that those
yep.
what iPhone version were we using back then? I think I had an iPhone.
Oh, the device.
I think at four,
I'm,
man.
I want to say the four.
Yeah,
I I had a 3GS myself, but the most current one probably was the four.
the iPhone
Maybe the
4.
4S. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's
I
what I
think the
had.
4S came out like in September of that year.
Yeah, I had the one
I know
that
the
was golden. Yeah, there was a golden one, and I was at the five. That was the five. So no, I had the one before that, the
uh,
black one. Yeah, anyways,
that's too long ago. I
too
just
long ago.
remember the iPhone 4 was the longest on the sale because the previous phones were released in June, and then the iPhone 4S came out in September. And so the iPhone 4 was on sale for 14, 15 months, something like that.
Gotcha.
Uh,
Yeah,
and I think that's one, yeah.
gotcha.
And I don't know for a gossip, cabin gossip fact. I did represent Canada at the TGen International Exposition back in 1993 as part of the choir, the Petits Chanteurs de Montréal, that is attached to the Oratory of Saint Joseph here in Montreal. And so we went there in '93 to represent Canada, basically.
So you got a good singing voice, then you don't need auto tune or you don't need any of those. Uh,
I used to have a very good voice.
right.
I can blame the age. I can blame whatever fact. I'm not. I did sing in other choirs afterwards, but I'm quite judgmental about my own voice.
There are really the way I understand it is either you're singing in tune or not, or how out of tune you are, and then the quality of your voice and the ranges that you can reach. But I remember when auto tune
Yeah,
came out, I went to a tech exposition. I believe it was in Las Vegas, and it was like it was free to try it, right? They were showing it off, and And the dude at the booth said, you want to try? And for the love of me, I can't hit a single note. I mean, I'm not tone deaf, but I'm tone retarded or something. And I'm sorry if that's not PC, but and so I said, all right, I'll give it a try. And I went for Dust in the Wind or something like not something necessarily easy. And and he cut me off at some point. He said, listen, I mean, it's smart. The software is smart, but you need to be somewhat close to like a note so that it can like, if you really, I wasn't so much all over the place. I was very flat, first of all, and I was not. I know, it couldn't help me basically. And I said, I told you I can't sing. He said, well, you
But you do have a great parrot voice, so it balances out.
know, yeah, the parrot voice works, and when we're singing sea shanties, those are like the songs that we sing on pirate ships. It doesn't matter so much that I'm way out of key because everybody has been imbibing grog, and grog, and they're out of key too. So everybody's out of key. It evens out some. Uh, but you
There you
have an
go.
artiste side to you, because you mentioned you were a designer, like a graphic designer, so you can draw and you
Yeah.
can sing and you can code, which is awesome. And it brings to mind the discussion that I had with, the 2 weeks ago with Matt Gardner, where we said that a really killer combination is to mix, like, to use both hemispheres of your brain to simplify things, but to have that scientific approach, which coding certainly is, meshed with a an artistic, flair or um, talent in that sense. And you're a prime example of that. So that's
Yeah. It usually when people talk about the work of doing programming, it's always most often than not described as problem solving, which I agree it is. I'm not saying no, but I really feel more like creating stuff out of just characters. I get to create something that will impact people's life, just the way we interact with stuff, the way we, whatever the output of the code is, I feel more of a creation than a problem solving.
right. Absolutely. And it does it is also, I used to be little not well, not that it's not a cabin gossip fact per se, but I used to be a computer programmer and software engineer myself, and I can attest that it is a very it's a creative activity, but it's a very intensive one. I mean, in terms of like the level of skill that's required in concentration, and for a guy like me, it was the challenge was actually to get in the zone, stay in the zone, right, and produce something.
Yeah,
I was a front end developer, and what's way back then was called a web designer, and I did a bit of everything. I did a bit of
yeah,
HTML and not much CSS, but HTML, and then some editing on Photoshop. And back then it was, you did it all. You were like
with
early 2000, right? And get a load of this. I used to work with a guy who was and we'll have him later on in the season. Um, and Benoit, or Ben, was like how could a champion of defending W3C conformity or something like that. And he
yeah,
was really,
okay,
really, really, really about that. And he was supervising my work. And at one point, I inserted a transparent pixel, like one by one, transparent, just to nudge stuff in the
okay.
for Internet Explorer, I think it was. And he reviewed my code, and he was just scandalized to see that, he was like, well, you used a transparent pixel. And I said, yeah. He says, you can't do that. And I said, well, that was the only way to nudge things around. And he goes like, but you can't. I'm like, I can. I just did. It works." He goes, you can't. Why not? He says, because that's evil. And he took that serious tone of voice. Like, I was like, what? And it was like I had committed the cardinal sin of web. For him, that was like the
Nice.
lowest of the low. That was, I was an apostle of the web. Uh,
He must have a hard time in the modern web times.
Yeah, but he's
But
moved on basically. He's an architect. He's a high level architect now, solution architect, and but back then we were very much deep in the trenches, getting websites up and running. So one thing I'd like to get your perspective on, and I think it's going to be very interesting and useful, is the obviously the perspective of a candidate, because in your journeys you've had the opportunity to be the one looking for to be the one looking for a job and dealing with headhunters and recruiters of all stripes. And one of the things that I always say about the profession is that there is no barrier to entry, basically. So anybody with a say an internet connection and a LinkedIn account can be a headhunter, pretend to be at least. And so you're dealing with headhunters and recruiters and what have you is your experience, your mileage. They say your mileage may vary. So I'd like to get your point of view. I certainly have mine. I've seen what my competition can do great and not so great. So I have an idea what practices are out there, but I'd like to get the perspective of one who's on the receiving end of it.
I can go in many directions, but I'm going to start with a joke, something that is meant to be humorful. The skill that you need to have to be a good headhunter is to be able to make search and copy paste in LinkedIn. That's the most important skill. And I'm going to develop on that because right away you can put myself in one box, but that's not the case. I've seen and experienced people who are meaninglessly just copying pasting based on some query result. I'm not exactly sure what's the mechanism or the interfaces in LinkedIn for that kind of stuff, but I've been contacted. For example, I've been at I worked at Radio Canada for 5 years, and during that time, like my title on LinkedIn was clearly like happy at Radio Canada, something along those lines, to make sure that, to be upfront, I wanted to stay on the network, but I was not looking. And someone contacted me for a 3 month contract at Radio Canada, saying that they've seen my profile, they loved it, and I would be perfect for that role. And they even had my career at heart. So I'm like, okay,
No
sure. So
less.
it exists, it
Yeah.
happens, but it's just one part. I've interacted with recruiters that are really, really great at what they do, and it shows. I think it shows almost right away, almost every time. I do keep a list of recruiters I interact with positively, or for example, like I remember one time you put a post about just mindfulness in general, nothing about a specific job
Yeah.
and I was intrigued, and right away there was like a connection or something in common that was like, okay, there's a perspective on the industry or a perspective about just humans interacting together. You are someone who wants to help other people find a job. So I could see from that one post uh, that it would be interesting to work with you.
Awesome.
Many developers see recruiters as just being bots
Right.
with good contacts. And recruiters, for good reasons, see candidates as being rude, not responding to messages, and being not very open
Yeah.
to opportunities that might be sometimes like the opportunity of a lifetime,
Yeah.
right? But I don't know, maybe the social network itself might create those kind of dynamics
Yeah.
in the sense that it's hard in a short message to get the attention of a candidate, uh, appear to have the interest at heart
Yeah.
authentically, and develop those kind of relations. But at the same time, I have found many good jobs on LinkedIn. I have met very nice people, and I'm glad I'm on that network in the end. Because, yeah. a hard balance to
It's a
strike.
mixed bag of experiences. But you mentioned, they feel like they're bots with like good networks of connections, and sometimes they are actually bots. There's a lot more AI software being involved in this in the profession, and a lot of automation going on. And there's a there's a certain point where it and very quickly veers into like completely impersonal. I can smell them from a mile away when I receive a whether it's whatever sales approach. I know when it's a script, especially when it's been trying to pull information out of my profile to make it personalized, and it veers into like very like very awesome, like you're awesome, you're doing awesome with such and such, and it's a company I used to work for 5 years ago or something. There's always a tell that I'm not talking to a human being, and it's just not worth it. And
The
regarding not looking at LinkedIn, because that person that contacted you for Radio Canada obviously didn't look. If they looked, they didn't look very long.
Not very much.
um I had something similar, it's like a couple of years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, right? And by that time I'd been doing well, something other than development for over 10 years, which is it's something. And she was reaching out for a development job. Really, basically, she was trying to offer me a gig as a software engineer. And what I did is I tried to push it as far as I could, and I said, sure, I'm interested. And we booked a call, and I got the name of the client and their budget. And I got as much information as I could out of it, and then I reached out to the
Hmm.
client to offer my services instead, saying, you're the headhunters you're dealing with are are ranked amateurs. They and here's why: because they reached out to me, and I haven't touched a keyboard for development purposes in more than a decade. And yet they were ready to send me over to. It just makes no sense.
Well,
And
I'm not sure if I want to say it's evil or genius. One of
somewhere
the
in
two.
between, yeah. It's a very pirate thing to do, but initially what I
It is.
wanted to do was to see how far I could push it. And when I
Yeah.
saw that I could push it indeed very far, I realized, well, why not try and leverage it, right? And see if there's I
Well,
can find out the name of the client. But um, so I need to ask, because I've seen that before. But what is Big Nerd Wrench? You're wearing it on your T-shirt, so you kind of knew
yes,
I was going to ask about it. Alumni, you're an alumni of Big Nerd Wrench. Illuminate
and
me
it
on.
is on purpose.
Oh, do tell, do tell. I'm curious.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Basically, I went for an advanced iOS bootcamp in 2017. So it's a long time ago, but it is meaningful to me. And it's really at that point that my imposter syndrome went away, almost.
Gotcha.
It it's really something that it made me jump in my just confidence overall to do what I'm doing. Of course, my technical expertise went up with that bootcamp. I think it was very knowledgeable, really well done. The guy who started Big Nerd Ranch was a developer at Next Step, the company that was purchased by Apple in '96. And like so someone who has been doing development for so many decades. He also has tremendous books on development for Mac, for iOS, and so forth. Now Android and web and stuff like that. Uh, and yeah, I'm quite proud of having done that for really the professional confidence it gave me,
Yeah.
basically.
So, because you knew how to do it, but this gave you like the sort of a formal education background into developing mobile apps. Is that how it impacted and attenuated your imposter syndrome?
I think that the realization midweek that I was just following along so great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Something that I was so afraid of not being able to achieve to do. I was so afraid of being lost in advanced stuff. But then at one point I was like, no, I'm really enjoying this. It's really like I get it. And even if I don't finish all the exercises and stuff, I understand everything that is being taught. And that's what had the last a long uh, impact on me.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. I didn't know it's a savvy name for a boot camp. I like it. I like it.
Well, it's the I know the birthplace of this is in Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia. Sorry,
Yeah.
um, and that founder always has that kind of hat on his head, and it's kind of the appeal.
Yeah, back in the 80s, right? Being a nerd was not necessarily a compliment, but a nerd and a geek, and it's the revenge of the nerd. 20 years later, but um, it is now. It is now, and especially what I like with boot camps. There's a lot of things I like with boot camps, but is that they have, they've positioned themselves marketing wise in a way that's appealing to both sexes. There's a lot of ladies and women, sorry, going into computer programming. It sort of made it showed it for what it is. It's more accessible than initially was thought, and that's great because when
Yeah.
further down the line we talk about diversity and inclusion and whatnot, but what according to me, one of the best ways to do it is to encourage people to get in from the start, right? And at the end, you do
Yep.
have the result is boot camps. They've been around for I don't know, man, quite a while, like 8 years, something like that. In it, I mean, you went in 2017, so that's like 6 years ago. So they've been around for a while, and now we
Yeah.
see, especially React developers and front end developers and JavaScript and whatever. Um, a lot of female talent in that pool, and I think
It's
it's
fantastic.
great.
Yes.
It's fantastic. Also, they're very short, but they're intensive, is what I found.
Yeah.
So I'm always very interested in talking to someone who graduated from a boot camp because I know that that person has the true grit to make it through that. If you make it through 3 months of 12 hours a day or thereabout, you have dedication, right? So it weeds out the those that aren't too
Yes.
serious. Um, one final subject I'd like to touch with you because I'm the kind of guy that always like comes up with nicknames very quickly, and some of them stick, some of them don't. Uh, but for better or worse, I call you Mr. Health or Mr. Healthy because you have a big interest
You
in
did.
in health technologies, and I was wondering, we discussed that in the past, you and I, where um, finding a company that has a mission or a product in which you're interested that resonates with you is important, and you're not the only one in that situation. Um, and I, for one, the cool recruiters work with clients whose product and missions is something that are of interest to me, so that I can actually be excited about bringing those opportunities to candidates. But tell us about your position regarding like the mission of companies that you've been working with or you'd like to work with, or what resonates with you. And health seems to be one of your interests. You're a long distance runner for one, and um,
Yeah.
and that's something that I know you like.
Yeah. It's I'm not sure if I would qualify as a new interest. The For so many jobs, I was focusing on the process behind the team. Uh, do they do agile? Well, everyone does, but are they
Yeah.
really doing agile? What's the code review process looks like? What's the tooling? Um, and that is, of course, very important and great, and it does have an impact on the job. But also, like with this new interest, newish interest, it's something that I'm thinking more and more about. Wanting to be on my device all the time to make sure that the application is true to the mission, a mission in which I believe in strongly, that I know will help people. It's a field where there's many possibilities to help people and many, many, many ways to do so. Uh, like just if we take the example of the diet, there's so many diets. Many of them are good, and so there's there's many different approaches to help people in their journey if they want to take that journey on. And so that aspect of well, all of the aspect of health really are really interesting to me, and I would love to contribute to the journey of other people to help someone who's trying to do, I don't know, intermittent fasting or wants to start Couch to 5K programs or all of those. Of, many tools exist, but doing something to contribute to that in my own special way in what I can do, right? I can develop iOS apps. This is what I can bring to the table. I'm
Yeah.
not a doctor. I'm not a coach. I'm not a right. So that would be very it, purposeful, meaningful to me. That would be fantastic. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, and I see more and more candidates that of a certain level of experience that are telling me, Marty, salaries are great in tech if you work with the right clients, and it's not so much about yeah, of course you need to make money and it needs to make sense,
Yeah.
right? Money wise, I'm not knocking it up, but it's not about making even more of it for the sake of making more of it. It's actually
Well,
being able to wake up in the morning and be excited that I'm making a difference,
yep.
being excited about the product you're bringing to the market, and being proud of it, owning it, feeling proud of it. And I always one of the anecdotes I always that always brings to mind is I spoke with someone who'd been working for 5 years, I think, in the one of those companies that when you look online, they're doing tools, like online tools, but they're very generic, and you don't know what kind of tools they're making until you dig a little deeper and you realize that, okay, so they're making like all the infrastructure and tools for the adult industry, but they don't look like, because there's a big segregation between like the tech and the content, but the content and the container, say. And
Mm-hmm.
so I spoke to someone who'd been working in that environment for 5 years, and I said, I usually ask, what are your reasons for, at least being curious about
When
the
it,
market, or just flat out wanting to leave? And he said, you know what, I'll be frank with you, Marty. I just want to be able to tell my grandmother what is it I actually do for a living, And I said, yeah, that's fair. You know,
yeah.
eh, Fair enough, man. I feel
Yeah.
you. And
Uh, I worked with someone once that previously was working with one of those company, and it's there was something about the technical challenge that was like having to be super high performant, like a lot of traffic to managers, and it was a good technical challenge for him, but it lasted a while, and yeah, so it's you gather experience with all of those things, right? You after a few years or whatever in those kind of environments, you know more about yourself, you know more about your ability,
yeah,
and also over time your priorities change. At some point, you might want to have an environment with a big corporation because they offer great work balance, work family balance, because you have young kids.
yeah,
Um, that's fantastic, and maybe at some point it moves on, and you're looking for something different. So it's never like it, uh, um, saying no to an environment, but saying right now in what I what I do with my current interests, I would like to push this aspect of the job more, and to yeah to so that purpose aspect is I feel needs to be aligned with your values. One of the first project, actually the first project I worked on was for a mental health research project that was dedicated for users who had mild to severe depression with suicidal tendencies. And first of all, like to be able to help those people was absolutely life changing because I didn't study in that.
yeah.
it was not my mission or my path, but I was able to help those people anyway. And also, like it, the people who worked on a project with me, they would explain to me what was the context of the usage of the app.
Yeah.
Right. So there would be a professor who would tell me like, okay, but if the user is in crisis, he cannot think that much. The
No.
feature that the critical feature doesn't need to be buried. It doesn't need to be in a submenu. It needs to be right in his face, super obvious, because that's all he can do at that
Yeah.
point in his life.
Yeah. And yeah, in UX or usability, they always talk about the context of the user, right? Meaning that, well, the classic examples will be if it's something on your phone that you would use on the train, you need to take into consideration that most users will be on the train or in an airport trying to catch an airplane. But in this case, we're talking about, okay, the user is actually contemplating seriously opting out of life. So that's a very,
Mm-hmm.
very specific, critical context that
Yeah.
you need to address correctly. Because obviously he's not, if he can't find it easily, he's not going to call support. He's not going to dig into a fact. He's at that moment where
Yeah.
he's about to say, F it, I want out. So you need to so it ties in with that usability context of usage in a very
Yeah.
specific and critical way. Um, so thank you for your time today. Do you have
My
any
pleasure.
parting words of wisdom that you'd like to share with the audience today, or
I, I've said all my wisdom already.
you've shared all of it?
I'm kidding. It was yeah, all of it.
All of it.
Um, no,
Any
just
advice for people looking for jobs, maybe, or anything?
focus on the human aspect of it. I would say um, contacts or just finding advices, hearing people talk, connecting with people that could involve going to a meetup if that's available to you, uh, talking to people even if it's on LinkedIn. Uh,
Yeah.
Focusing on those connections, I think, is the best way to find something that is meaningful to you. The interaction that you're gonna get will make you think deeper about what you're really looking for, what are the real opportunities that are aligned with your values and where you are at this point in your life. Uh, yeah, I think I was.
Agreed.
Yeah, that's my
Agreed.
advice.
In a world where even my grandmother is talking about ChatGPT, um, it's refreshing, man. It's refreshing to hear that I'm not the only one, and I know I'm not the only one who thinks that, some things are better done, with human.
Yep.
And yeah, it's refreshing, and I'm glad to hear we're on the same mind. This is in on so many things. So thank you for being here today with us, Frank Oliver, and
My
and
pleasure. Thank you.